Welcome to the first video in our tutorial series. We're going to be learning how to use Virtuoso, which is a software development kit for Unity that we made to help solve some common problems in XR. Today we're going to be getting our project set up with VSDK. So here we are in Unity. I'm using Unity version 2019, and this is just a normal empty starter project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the website and download VSDK and import it into the project. The link to the website will be down in the description. So what you're going to want to do to download this is go over to the Releases tab and go to the latest release and download vsdk.zip and tutorialassets.zip. So I've already downloaded these, so I'm just going to import them into the project. So once you're done importing, you're going to see two new folders, one labeled Virtuoso. This contains the core of VSDK, and then Tutorial Assets, which contains models, textures, and other assets that we will be using in later tutorials. So for now, we're going to continue getting set up in this main scene. First thing we're going to want to do is delete the main camera. Next, navigate into the Prefabs folder inside the Virtuoso folder and drag in the VRTK SDK Manager. At this point, your code may recompile, so you might just have to wait a minute before continuing. So once that's been added to the scene and everything's had a chance to recompile, you should also drag in the VRTK scripts. We'll go over what this does in a later tutorial, but it's good to have around. So next we're going to set up the Unity XR SDK. So start by expanding this tree down to SDK setups and create an empty object. I'm just going to name this object Unity XR. Then you can grab this Unity base camera rig prefab and drag it underneath the Unity XR object. Next, add the VRTK SDK script. VRTK SDK setup script. Under Quick Select, select Unity. I'm going to select Standalone Oculus because I'm using an Oculus headset. If you're using SteamVR, you're going to want the OpenVR option instead. And then for these two last options, I'm just going to set them to Simulator and No Hands. We'll go over what this means in a later tutorial. For now, we're just interested in getting set up, so I'm going to skip over it. So next, go up to this root object here and uncheck Auto Manage VR Settings. And then go down here and press Auto Populate. This brings the Unity XR SDK setup into the list here. We're just going to drag it up to the top so that we can use it. Whatever's on top will be the default that VSDK chooses to use. So we're almost done with basic setup. Next, we're going to go and change the XR settings. So I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings, Player, and scroll down to XR settings at the bottom. I'm going to check virtual reality supported, and to this list here I'm going to add Oculus. Again, if you're using SteamVR, you're going to want to select the OpenVR option instead. So now everything should be set up, so I'm just going to press the play button to test and make sure that everything is set up right. So we can see that the camera's rendering. I'm going to move the headset around a little bit. You can see that the view is changing. So it looks like we're set up. So the last thing we're going to do in this tutorial is set up the controllers so that they're ready for interactions in later tutorials. So I'm going to expand this VRTK scripts object, and under here we have the left controller script alias and the right controller script alias. These two objects hold a lot of scripts that are used to control interactions with the controllers. So in order to finish the setup with these, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the SDK Manager and drag these two objects into the script alias fields of the SDK manager. What this does is lets the SDK manager know that these are stand-ins for the actual controllers, so it will appropriately attach them to the necessary objects to handle tracking. So at this point, our controllers don't have any visual representation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some. So I'm going to right-click on the left controller, and I'm going to add a sphere. Then I'm going to scale this sphere down to 0.1 in each axis. And I'm going to remove this sphere collider object because we only want the visual representation and not any physics adjustments. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right controller. So now when we hit play, we should see each controller fully tracked and represented as a sphere. So you can see here, we are tracking our controllers and they're being represented as spheres inside Unity. So that's it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we're going to be learning how to create interactable objects and start to create some real experiences in VR.